Neely was placed in a chokehold by a 24-year-old subway rider for nearly 15 minutes.
Look at the moment a former Marine put that man in a chokehold. The Marine was questioned by cops but then let go. Now tonight, we're waiting to find out if he'll face charges. Also tonight, we're getting a closer look at the man who died. His name, Jordan Neely. The Manhattan Borough President, Mark Levine, tweeting this video saying he often saw Neely perform on the subway, dancing and impersonating Michael Jackson.
It did not appear this man, who seemed to be suffering from some kind of mental disturbance, was seeking to assault anyone.
The incident putting a focus on mental health issues and homelessness in the subways.
There is growing outrage that the former Marine who was questioned has not been charged.
On the Uptown F train platform at Broadway Lafayette Street, a vigil for Jordan Neely.
Protesters once again gathering near the Broadway and Lafayette subway station, demanding accountability in the wake of Jordan Neely's death.
People are anguishing over and wondering why the man who killed Jordan Neely has not yet been charged with a crime. In fact, people are not just wondering, they're protesting in the streets, including our comrades in New York City. But again, why? As I record this commentary over a week after the murder, have there been no charges against those who committed that murder? Now, to answer that, I'm going to talk about dictatorship. But let's not mystify that word. Dictatorship means the monopoly of the legitimate use of force by one group in society over the rest. Jordan Neely's murder is an example of class dictatorship in its peculiarly American form. Jordan Neely lost the only life he had to the everyday repression that goes on against those this system has in one way or another used once and thrown away or never had use for at all. Those who have been driven into the hard, almost impossible life on the streets by the heartless workings of this system, capitalism, imperialism, and who have in one way or another been broken by it. Usually this kind of brutality and murder is done by the official enforcers of this class dictatorship. But today, when the norms of how society have been ruled are breaking down, apparently all kinds of people now feel like they have the right to violently enforce their idea of order on other people. Why did Daniel Penny feel empowered to put another man in a chokehold and hold him in it for 15 minutes, even after that human being had gone limp? Why did the other subway riders go along with that? And why did people defend, or at least understand, his action on both social media as well as in the big media, whether fascist or liberal? What this ends up justifying is not just state terror, but freelance piggery against oppressed people. A chokehold? Okay, so who's famous for chokeholds, especially in New York? The police, who murdered Eric Garner in 2014 for the horrible crime of selling loose cigarettes. And who does not know what chokeholds can do, especially after the murder of George Floyd? But a huge section of people, and not all of them outright fascists, are apparently okay with this. After all, we must have order, says Eric, the Black Giuliani, Adams, as he issues yet more edicts to forcibly remove homeless people from public life and to incarcerate them either in the insane asylum prisons of New York City or the prison-like psychiatric institutions upstate. And let's reverse this just for a minute. Is there anywhere in America in which you can imagine a black man putting a white homeless man in a chokehold and killing him, having the whole thing recorded on video, and not even getting charged? Actually, he'd be lucky if he didn't get killed himself. That's because class dictatorship in America has always been intricately linked with the oppression of whole peoples, of Black people, Latinos, Native Americans, and others. And Jordan Neely is one more tragic example of that. In a deep sense, Daniel Penny was not acting alone. He was acting as he had been trained to act by this system, both through his time in the Marines and his time just growing up and being conditioned by the workings and the assumptions of this system. And those applauding him or justifying him or excusing him are acting as they have been conditioned to think and act by this system. But what about the braggery of this system about, okay, life can be rough in America, but in the end, every individual can flourish? Really? Which individuals? And on what basis? Jordan Neely is someone who is both very talented and troubled at the same time. And the best your system can do for him is to break him down and put him on the streets and finally kill him? And then not even a semblance of justice? Oh, but Jordan Neely had a record of 40 arrests. And how many of those were for the crimes of the homeless? But the law under our system treats everyone equally. So both Jordan Neely and Bill Gates are equally forbidden from performing on the trains. Both Jordan Neely and Elon Musk are equally forbidden from squeegeeing windshields to make enough to eat a little bit of breakfast. Both Jordan Neely and Eric Jr. or Ivanka Trump will be arrested or maybe even killed if they have a mental breakdown in public. Really? Think about it for 1 minute. People talk about the contradiction between the immense wealth and luxury in New York City and the scourge of homelessness. But every contradiction contains both a connection as well as a potential clash. The illusion of individual freedom is the veil for and coexists with class oppression and misery. Right after I finished this piece, I saw an article entitled, "How the System Failed Jordan Neely." And what it seemed to be talking about was how the mental health system didn't reach him in time. But the mental health system is just a very, very subordinate cog in the larger system, the real system, the capitalist imperialist system that determines all the rest. As long as you accept the terms of that system and limit your imagination to what you think might be possible within what capitalism, imperialism requires to keep going every day, you won't be able to even begin to ask the right questions. You won't be able to really dig into the roots of why homelessness, along with addiction, suicide, and mental health issues more generally, are exploding in this society. Or to figure out why the only things you notice being done about any of those is the explosion of the for-profit assembly line mental health services that advertise nonstop on cable to go along with the punitive policing of the Democratic Party pigs like the one who runs New York City, Eric the Black Giuliani Adams. But once you free your mind from the confines of what is possible in this capitalist imperialist system, once you truly understand the roots of these exploding crises in that system, then you can begin to clear your head and clear your eyes. You can begin to see that if we made a revolution, a real revolution, we could proceed from human beings as the most important, the most creative, and the most potentially powerful productive force. With all the heart and brain power that is now suppressed, distorted, and mangled by the dog-eat-dog relations that people must enter into or live with every day just to survive. Then and only then would the horizons of the truly possible open up. And then and only then would you fully see the madness of how we are forced to live. In thinking about the killing of Jordan Neely and about the response of way too much of the public, as well as the nature of this system, I went back to read what the revolutionary leader and the author of the New Communism, Bob Avakian, said in reference to the police murder of Tyisha Miller. Tyisha Miller was a young black woman who passed out in her car as a result of a seizure and was shot 11 times by police. BA said, if you can't handle this situation differently than this, then get the fuck out of the way. Not only out of the way of this situation, but get off the earth. Get out of the way of the masses of people. Because we could have handled this situation any number of ways that would have resulted in a much better outcome. The heartless murder of Jordan Neely is one more evidence of a time in which you and all of us are being forced to confront the brutal, vengeful, mad reality of today, where things are going, and whether anything can be done about it. Well, something can be done. We can make revolution. We have the sweeping vision, the firm foundation, and the concrete blueprint for the new society that could enable people to flourish together in the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America, written by Bob Avakian. We have the strategy to make that revolution, and not in the far-off future, but in these times. A revolution that can put in place the economic system, the political structures, and the social relations between people to figure out new approaches to solve the problems that confound people under this system. And we have the leadership for that in Bob Avakian and the RevComs, the revolutionary communists. This is what you need to be part of.
Lenny, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. As you know, I got up early this morning and I was reading this piece by Bob Avakian, An Exploiter's Vision of Freedom, about the U.S. Constitution, and it goes very deeply. It's up on our website now, and I really want everybody to read this because it goes very deeply into what's behind those words of freedom, we the people, and what really is underneath it, the system and the forms of class oppression. And I wanted to, I sent you a couple of thoughts on it. You came back to me and said, why don't you make that into a piece? And that's what we tried to do.
It made a big difference that you pulled the lens back, because there's so much confusion around this murder and what's really involved in it. And this is really going to help people do that. And I also appreciate that you directed people to you're just mentioning that piece, to get into Bob Avakian, to look at the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America, and to watch this show. And what else do people need to be doing?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. In reference to these kinds of things, where oppressors in or out of uniform are doing things to the people that are clearly unjust and illegal, we have got to develop the capability to do what is said in Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. And I want to read this. He says, as the revolution grows, there is plenty that needs to be done, and urgently, which requires real boldness and heart to stand up against the fascists and any other oppressive force in their moves to threaten and intimidate, brutalize, and even murder people. Let me make clear that I am not calling for launching unprovoked and unjustified attacks on anybody, but there is a right and a need, and there is the responsibility to defend people who are oppressed and brutalized under this system. And those who represent and stand for what is right and are being attacked because of that. And I think this kind of force, which does require a great deal of forethought and preparation to really put into practice, if it is part of a larger movement for revolution, which has many facets, I think can be a major part of the roadmap that can really fundamentally, that can put revolution on the map.
And I think it's important, Lenny, that people learn what that roadmap is, the full roadmap. And you can do that in the work that by Bob Avakian, Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating, that you can find right at the top of our website, revcom.us. And so I want to thank you for the commentary and for this brief follow-up. And let's go. Let's put revolution on the map.
Very much.
So we just heard Lenny Wolf talk about the horrific killing of Jordan Neely in New York City on the subways. And Lenny spoke about dictatorship and democracy. And so from the interview we did with Bob Avakian, he spoke about the question of dictatorship under this system and the dictatorship under a new revolutionary society, and democracy in both contexts. And this excerpt will give you a larger materialist view of these questions of democracy and dictatorship. So let's watch. And you've made a couple of very provocative statements that have to do with the nature of this radically different state power. One, you wrote that not all dictatorships are bad. And another time you said democracy, that's just another word for dictatorship. So these are highly controversial and provocative statements, particularly in this brainwashed society, as to what the nature of what democracy actually means and what it is. So I thought it'd be important to get into why it is necessary to be straight up about this for humanity to get free.
Well, look, once again, it depends on what the content of the dictatorship is. But let's back up a step. First of all, we have to define what is a dictatorship. A dictatorship is not, Nikita Khrushchev pounding his shoe on the table in the UN and saying, "We will bury you." That's not a dictatorship. A dictatorship, imagine just one person trying to dictate to all of society with no institutions to back it up and no underlying relations that's based on. It would be impossible. Just think about it. A dictatorship is dictatorship by a class. It's a dictatorship based on an underlying system, either a capitalist imperialist system of exploitation, or on the other hand, a radically different dictatorship of the socialist system, which is moving to uproot all exploitation and oppression. So they're qualitatively different. I know when we went out to the law school, I think at UCLA, and we, popularized this article that you're referring to, which made this point about what a dictatorship actually is. It's the rule of a class, not of an individual or a small clique of people. And, it rests on a definite underlying system of social and most fundamentally, economic relations. So we went there and one of these law students said, "Well, you're redefining the definition of what a dictatorship is." Yes, because we're bringing forward the scientific explanation of what a dictatorship is and redefining the unscientific notion that a dictatorship is or could be exercised by just one person or a small group of people with no understanding of the underlying system that they're trying to enforce and what relations that system embodies. So that's the first thing you have to understand. What is a dictatorship? So, and the dictatorship of the proletariat, the exploited class, that's another way of saying socialist state power. Let's demystify. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about state power to enforce the transformations, to be the backing, the institutionalized backing for the transformations that the socialist revolution is all about. Uprooting the oppression of women, uprooting all gender oppression, uprooting the exploitation of people, where some people make money by forcing other people to work for them, uprooting, all the relations among different races and nationalities that are oppressive, that embodies the supremacy of one group over another, and so on and so on. This is what the socialist state power, the dictatorship of the proletariat, is all about. Now, is there democracy under this dictatorship? Yes, there's democracy in a way that is unimaginable under the current capitalist imperialist system, which is the rule of exploiters. There's the involvement, the increasing involvement, wave after wave, of broad masses of people in actually determining the direction of society on the basis of leadership, which, leads them to transform the oppressive relations that they rose up against to make revolution in the first place. So yes, you need leadership, but there is active involvement. And yes, as I said, there's a lot of dissent, ferment, in the arts, in culture generally, for example, in the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America, it makes the point. It talks about the principle, which is the principle that guides this whole Constitution, and the dictatorship of the proletariat, the socialist state power that it envisions and speaks to, which is solid core with a lot of elasticity based on the solid core. So in the realm of education, for example, it says that the solid core of the educational system in this new social society will be the application of dialectical materialism, the scientific approach to understanding material reality both in nature and in society. It says that will be the solid core, but there will also be the elasticity in the form of allowance for other and opposing viewpoints to be presented in the context of the educational system, and so throughout society, in the realm of culture, in the realm of the media, and so on. This is how it is envisioned. This is what we've come to understand needs to be applied in terms of actually exercising socialist state power, the dictatorship of the proletariat, in a way that increasingly involves the conscious revolutionary activity of the masses of people, and they're thrashing out different ideas and programs and where they'll lead in a living way. So, now to talk about democracy on the other hand, under this system, Mao said, Mao said, sounds religious. But anyway, Mao did say, and he was right. So that's the important point, that democracy is part of the superstructure. What do we mean by that? Well, like you have a house that has a foundation, the walls and the roof are the superstructure over the foundation. So in society, the foundation is the economic system, and the political institutions and processes and the culture are the superstructure that arises on that and then in turn reflects and reinforces it. So the point is that in the superstructure, democracy is part of that superstructure. And what does that mean? It means that the superstructure, again, arises on the basis of and in turn reinforces the underlying foundation, the economic system that is the foundation for the society. So when you have a capitalist economic foundation based on exploitation, the superstructure, in order for the society to function, has to be an expression of and reinforce that underlying system of exploitation. And if it doesn't, then the society will just come completely unraveled and be torn apart. And I've used the example many times, and I think it's a good example, of the right to eat. The laws as well as the politics are part of the superstructure. So let's say you had a law in capitalist society that said people have a right to eat, and let's expand it more broadly. People have a right to all the basic necessities of life. I mean, after all, what can be more fundamental? That you have to, that you can have the basic necessities of life, or that you're denied the basic necessities of life. So let's say you pass a law. Some well-meaning social democrats got in, and they said, let's pass a law that says that everyone has the right to eat. All right, well now that's a right enshrined in law. So hungry masses who don't have the money to pay for, forget about Whole Foods, what is it? Ralph's Market, from the Big Lebowski, right? Anyway, let's say they go into Ralph's Market, and they go up to the cashier and they got all this food, and the cashier says that'll be $173.28. And they say, I'm sorry, I only have $16. Well, then you're gonna have to put some food back. No, I don't, because I have a right to eat. It's written into the law. Now imagine what would happen then. The whole economy would very quickly fall apart, because it takes money to produce all this stuff that's sold in the store. You know, the store has to have a building, it has to have maintenance, it has to pay employees, plus all the other people that had to be paid and all the structures that had to exist and the machinery that had to be used to produce the food. And first of all, the farm workers to get it out of the ground and so on, and to plant it. All that is expenses that went into producing all this food. So if people just walk in and say, I have a right enshrined in law, you can't stop me, I'm going to take anything I need out of this store as long as I say it's for my basic needs, you could see how the whole society would come completely unraveled. So, this is one illustration of how the superstructure of politics and laws and so on has to reflect the underlying system. The democracy we have under this system is the democracy of the capitalist system of exploitation. It means that you can exercise rights as long as they stay within the framework of the capitalist system of exploitation.